The Nevada desert howled like a wounded beast, its winds tearing through Blackthorn Canyon in 1885. A forsaken scar of earth where dreams went to die, Amos Reed, a grizzled 45-year-old former bounty hunter, sat alone in his crumbling adobe shack, the weight of a decade's regrets heavier than the revolver on his hip. His gray eyes, shadowed by a battered black Stetson, traced the scars on his knuckles, marks of a life spent chasing outlaws and losing his own soul. The fire in the hearth flickered low, casting jagged shadows on the clay walls, the only company he'd kept since his wife, Eliza, died in a raid 6 years ago. Whiskey burned his throat, but it couldn't drown the ghosts. Then, a desperate pounding shattered the silence. Like a heartbeat against the oak door, Amos froze, his hand instinctively gripping the Colt, his pulse quickening. Who'd brave this godforsaken canyon in a sandstorm? He cracked the door, the wind screaming past, and saw them 3 Paiute women, their faces gaunt, their clothes torn by thorns and dust. The leader, Neela, 30, stood tall, her dark brown eyes fierce despite the blood caked on her cheek. Her black hair, braided tight, whipped in the gale, and her patched deerskin dress clung to her frame, torn at the shoulder. Behind her, Mara, 24, swayed, her warm brown eyes clouded with exhaustion, a faded red shawl slipping to reveal a bruised arm. The youngest, Saya, barely 16, clutched a woven basket, her wide brown eyes darting like a trapped doe's, her cotton dress shredded at the hem. "Please," Neela rasped, her voice raw but unyielding. "They'll kill us if you don't let us in." Amos's jaw tightened. He'd sworn never to open his door again, not since Eliza's blood stained this very ground. But Neela's gaze held a fire that reminded him of her, and Saya's trembling hands stirred something he thought long dead. "Who's after you?" Amos growled, his voice rough as gravel, the Colt still in hand. Neela stepped closer, unflinching, her breath visible. In the cold, men who take what isn't theirs. We stole something they want back. Her hand hovered near a small knife tucked in her belt, a Paiute design etched into its handle. Mara leaned against the doorframe, her shawl catching the firelight, her voice faint. "We just need one night." Saya's basket shook in her grip, a faint clink of metal inside betraying its weight. Amos's eyes narrowed. Trouble had found him again, and it were the faces of these women. Before he could answer, a distant howl cut through the storm, not the wind, but horses, their hooves pounding like war drums. Neela's eyes flicked to the darkness, her hand tightening. "On the knife. They're here," she whispered. Amos shoved the door wide, his spurs jangling as he stepped aside. Inside, now, the women stumbled in, Saya tripping, her basket spilling a single gold coin onto the floor. Amos's blood ran cold. Gold meant blood, always. He slammed the door, barring it with a heavy beam, and grabbed his rifle from the wall. Through the shutter's slats, he saw shadows for riders, their dusters flapping like vultures' wings. In the storm, the firelight danced on Neela's face, her defiance unbroken. But Mara's trembling hands and Saya's stifled sob told him they were running out of time. What secret hides in that basket? And why is Amos risking his solitude for? Strangers, stay tuned, because the storm's just beginning to rage. The Nevada desert roared, its sandstorm clawing at the adobe shack in Blackthorn Canyon, 1885. Like a beast hungry for blood. Inside, Amos Reed knelt by the hearth, his gray eyes sharp under the brim of his battered black Stetson, his Colt revolver cold against his palm. The fire's weak glow danced on the clay walls, barely warming the chill that had settled in his bones since Eliza's death 6 years ago. Across the room, the 3 Paiute women, Neela, Mara, and Saya, huddled in a shadowed corner, their ragged breaths sharp against the storm's wail. Neela, 30, stood like a sentinel, her dark brown eyes blazing with defiance, her braided black hair streaked with dust, her deerskin dress, patched and torn at the shoulder, clung to her lean frame, a Paiute knife with an etched bone handle tucked in her belt. Mara, 24, clutched her faded red shawl, her warm brown eyes flickering with fear, a bruise darkening her arm where the fabric slipped. Saya, 16, curled against the wall, her wide brown eyes glistening with unshed tears, her woven basket trembling in her small hands. the faint glint of a gold coin inside betraying its weight. Amos's voice cut through the tension, low and rough, as the desert itself. "Who's after you? And why?" He kept his Colt trained on the door, its oak groaning under the wind's assault. Neela stepped forward, her boots scraping the dirt floor, her gaze unyielding. "Cullen's men. They trade in blood and call it business. We took something they stole from our people." Her words carried a fire that stirred Amos's old instincts, the ones that once tracked outlaws across the Sierra. Mara's voice trembled, barely audible. "They burned our village for it. That gold was our last chance to rebuild." She pulled Saya closer, her shawl wrapping them both, a fragile cocoon against the nightmare outside. Saya's lips quivered, but she stayed silent, her fingers white-knuckled around the basket. Amos's eyes flicked to the coin on the floor, its dull shine a magnet for trouble. "You brought a war to my door," he said, his tone hard but laced with something softer curiosity. "Maybe, or the ghost of compassion." The fire snapped, casting jagged shadows that seemed to pulse with the storm's rhythm. Amos moved to the window, his spurs jangling, and peered through the frost-crusted slats. For riders loomed in the haze, their dusters flapping like vultures' wings, torchlight slicing through the sandstorm's curtain. Their horses pawed the ground, hooves crunching gravel, their silhouettes sharp and menacing. "They know you're here," Amos said, checking the rifle propped against the wall, its barrel cold as his resolve. Neela straightened, her knife glinting as she adjusted her grip. "Then we faced them. I've fought worse." Her voice was a blade, sharp and steady, but her hand brushed Saya's shoulder, a fleeting gesture of protection that didn't escape Amos's notice. Mara's eyes darted to the door, her breath quickening. "They won't stop, not until they have her." She nodded at Saya, whose small frame seemed to shrink under the weight of their stares. A heavy fist pounded the door, shaking the shack's frail walls. "Reed," a voice roared, raw and guttural, like gravel under a boot. "Give us the women and the gold, or we'll bury you with this dump." Amos's heart thudded, not with fear, but with the echo of Eliz's scream when raiders tore through this canyon years ago. He'd failed her then, but not tonight. "Get behind the crate," he hissed to Neela, pointing to a narrow alcove at the back. Neela hesitated, her brown eyes searching his, a flicker of trust battling her defiance. "You don't owe us anything," she said, her voice softer now, almost a challenge. Amos met her gaze, his jaw set. "I owe myself." As Neela guided Mara and Saya to the alcove, Saya's basket slipped, spilling another coin onto the dirt floor. The clink was deafening, a beacon in the silence between the door's blows. Mara gasped, scrambling to scoop it up, her shawl falling to reveal more bruises on her wrist. Amos's gut twisted not at the gold, but at the fear in Saya's eyes, so like Eliz's in her final moments. He slid the rifle into his hands, its weight grounding him as the door splintered under another strike. Neela crouched beside the crate, her knife ready, her silhouette sharp against the firelight. "If they get in," she whispered, "aim for the heart." Amos nodded, his shadow merging with hers in the dim glow. The storm outside raged, but inside, a different kind of battle was brewing, one that would test more than his aim. What's in that basket worth dying for? And can Amos outrun his past to save them? Don't miss the next part, because the storm's about to break wide open. The Nevada sandstorm battered the adobe shack in Blackthorn Canyon, 1885. Its howl drowning out the crackle of the dying fire. Amos Reed stood by the splintered door, his gray eyes locked on the frost-crusted shutters, Colt revolver steady in his scarred hand. The air was thick with tension, the faint scent of sage and fear clinging to the clay walls. In the alcove behind a crate, Neela, 30, crouched with her Paiute knife drawn, her dark brown eyes fierce, her braided hair dusted with sand. Her deerskin dress, torn at the shoulder, revealed a fresh cut, blood mingling with dirt. Mara, 24, held Saya close, her warm brown eyes wide with dread, her red shawl slipping to expose more bruises. Saya, 16, clutched her woven basket, its hidden gold coins clinking softly, her wide brown eyes darting between Amos and the door. Amos's voice was a low growl. "What's in that basket? Worth burning a village for?" Nila's gaze met his, unyielding, her knife catching the firelight. Relics Paiute heirlooms, melted into gold by Cullen's men. They took our history, our future. We took it back. Her words hit Amos like a bullet, stirring memories of Eliz's locket. Stolen in the raid that killed her, Mara's voice trembled, her shawl tightening around Saya. Cullen's men, they kept Saya as leverage. She's the last of our weavers. Saya's small hands shook, but her chin lifted, a spark of defiance in her eyes. I wove that basket to hide it, she whispered. Amos's jaw clenched. These weren't just thieves, they were fighting for their people. A heavy thud shook. The door would groaning under the blow. Read, last chance. A voice snarled from outside. Sharp as a blade, Amos motioned to the women, his spurs scraping the dirt floor. Stay low. He slid to the window, peering out. For riders waited, their torches flickering in the storm, dusters flapping like dark omens. One held a rifle, its barrel glinting. Amos's heart pounded, not with fear, but with the weight of a choice he hadn't faced since Eliza. Neela crawled to his side, her shoulder brushing his, her breath quick but steady. You don't have to do this, she said, her voice soft but firm, her knife ready. Amos glanced at her, the firelight tracing the resolve in her face. I'm done running, he said. The door buckled, a splintered plank giving way. Amos fired a warning shot through the gap, the crack echoing like thunder. A curse rang out, followed by the thud of boots retreating. But the silence was worse, heavy with menace. Neela pointed to a loose adobe brick in the alcove wall. There's a crawl space leads to the canyon's edge. Amos nodded, his rifle ready as he helped Mara and Saya toward the wall. Mara's hands trembled, but she pushed Saya forward, whispering, "You're stronger than you know." Saya's basket caught on the crate, spilling another coin. Its glint on the floor was a taunt, a reminder of the blood it had cost. Amos kicked it into the shadows, his eyes meeting Nila's. "Move fast," he said, his voice rough with urgency. As they pried the brick loose, a torch crashed through the window, flames licking the dry crate. Smoke curled upward, choking the air. Neela shoved Saya through the crawlspace, her deerskin dress tearing further. Mara followed, her shawl catching firelight as she vanished. Amos grabbed Nila's arm, pulling her back as another shot rang out, grazing the wall where her head had been. Her brown eyes locked on his, a flicker of gratitude beneath her defiance. "Your trouble," he muttered, a faint smile breaking through. She smirked, her knife flashing. "You're welcome." The fire spread, and the riders' shouts grew louder. Time was running out. Can Amos lead them through the flames? Or will Cullen's men claim their prize? Stay tuned, because the canyon's secrets are just beginning to burn. The Nevada sandstorm raged, its howl swallowing Blackthorn Canyon as flames licked the adobe shack's crate. 1885. Smoke stung Amos Reed's eyes, his gray gaze fierce under his black Stetson. Colt revolver tight in his scarred grip. The air was thick with ash and fear, the fire's glow casting jagged shadows on the clay walls. Neela, 30, shoved Saya through the crawlspace, her dark brown eyes blazing, her deerskin dress torn further, blood seeping from a cut on her shoulder. Her Paiute knife flashed as she turned, braided hair whipping. Mara, 24, crawled after Saya, her warm brown eyes wide, red shawl singed at the edges, bruises stark on her arm. Saya, 16, clutched her woven basket, gold coins clinking inside, her wide brown eyes glistening with panic as she vanished into the dark. Amos fired another shot through the splintered door, the crack echoing as a rider's curse cut through the storm. "Move," he barked, his spurs jangling as he pushed Neela toward the crawlspace. Her hand grazed his arm, warm and fleeting, a spark of defiance in her glance. "You're not staying behind," she said, her voice sharp but laced with concern. Amos's jaw tightened, memories of Eliz's last stand flooding back her blood. On this very canyon's dirt, he wouldn't lose again. He dove through the narrow gap, the fire's heat searing his back, and landed in the canyon's shadow, and biting his face. Neela pulled him up, her grip strong, her brown eyes searching his for a moment along. The crawlspace led to a jagged ledge overlooking the canyon, sagebrush thrashing below in the storm's grip. Mara held Saya close, the girl's basket trembling, a coin slipping free and glinting in the faint moonlight. Amos snatched it, tucking it into his coat. "No more beacons," he growled. Neela nodded, her knife ready, her deerskin dress clinging to her frame, dust and blood painting her like a warrior. The riders' torches flickered below, their shouts rising over the wind. "They're circling," Amos said, scanning the rocky path. A narrow trail snaked down to a dry creek bed, barely visible in the haze. "That's our way out." They scrambled down the trail, rocks skittering underfoot. Mara stumbled, her shawl catching on a thorn, tearing further. Saya grabbed her hand, her small voice fierce. "Keep going, Mara." Amos led, rifle raised, his boots crunching gravel. Neela stayed close, her knife glinting, her breath quick but steady. A shot rang out, kicking up dust inches from Amos's feet. He shoved the women behind a boulder, his shoulder brushing Nila's. Her warmth a jolt against the cold. "Stay down," he whispered, peering over the rock. 3 riders closed in, their dusters flapping, rifles gleaming. The 4th was missing. Amos's gut twisted. A trap, a shadow moved above, torchlight glinting off a blade. Amos spun, firing, and the 4th rider fell, his body rolling down the slope. Nila's knife flashed, cutting a rope tied to a nearby sagebrush, a tripwire meant to snare them. "Cullen's men don't play fair," she muttered, her eyes meeting Amos's, a flicker of respect in their depths. Mara's breath hitched, her hand clutching Saya's. "They'll never stop," she whispered, her voice breaking. Amos reloaded, his hands steady, but his heart racing, not just from the fight, but from Nila's fire, Saya's courage, and Mara's quiet strength. The creek bed lay ahead, a faint promise of escape, but the torches were closing fast. "Will the canyon's shadows hide them? Or will Cullen's men claim their blood?" "Keep watching, because the fight for redemption is far from over." The Nevada sandstorm screamed through Blackthorn Canyon, 1885, its fury cloaking the dry creek bed where Amos Reed crouched behind a boulder, his gray eyes sharp under his black Stetson. His Colt revolver gleamed in the moonlight, his scarred hands steady despite the blood trickling from a graze on his arm. Beside him, Neela, 30, gripped her Paiute knife, her dark brown eyes fierce, her deerskin dress torn and blood-streaked, her braided hair loose and wild. Mara, 24, shielded Saya, her warm brown eyes wide with fear, her red shawl tattered, bruises stark against her skin. Saya, 16, clung to her woven basket, the gold relics inside clinking softly, her wide brown eyes locked on the canyon's shadows, defiance battling her terror. The riders' torches flickered closer, their dusters flapping like specters in the storm. Amos counted 3, their rifles raised, boots crunching gravel. "They're splitting up," he whispered, his voice rough as the desert. Neela nodded, her knife ready, her shoulder brushing his, a fleeting warmth that grounded him. "We hit them now or we're done," she said, her tone steel. Amos glanced at Mara and Saya, huddled low, Mara's hand steadying Saya's trembling basket. "Stay here," he told them, his spurs glinting as he shifted. Mara's voice cracked. "Don't let them take her." Saya's small hand tightened on the basket, a Paiute bead woven into its rim, catching the moonlight. Amos and Neela crept along the creek bed, sagebrush clawing at their clothes. A rider loomed ahead, his torch casting a red glow. Amos lunged, tackling him, the man's rifle clattering as they hit the dirt. Nila's knife flashed, silencing his shout with a precise strike to the shoulder. The torch sputtered out, plunging them into darkness. "One down," Neela hissed, her breath quick, her eyes meeting Amos's in the faint moonlight, a spark of trust amid the chaos. A shot rang out, grazing Nila's arm. She stumbled, blood seeping through her sleeve, but her grip on the knife didn't falter. Amos fired back, dropping a second rider, his body slumping against a rock. Mara's scream pierced the storm. Amos spun, heart pounding, and saw the 3rd rider dragging Saya from the boulder, his arm around her throat, rifle pressed to her back. Mara clawed at him, her shawl falling, her bruises stark in the torchlight. "The gold," the rider snarled, his voice raw. Saya's basket fell, coins and relics spilling, golden beads etched with Paiute symbols glinting like stars. Amos raised his Colt, but the rider used Saya as a shield, his eyes wild. "Back off, Reed." Neela moved like a shadow, her knife arcing toward the rider's leg. He roared, loosening his grip, and Saya broke free, scrambling to Mara. Amos fired, the shot clean, the rider collapsing in the dust. The storm quieted, the wind dropping to a low moan. Amos helped Neela to her feet, her arm bleeding, but her eyes unyielding. "You're hit," he said, his voice tight, tearing a strip from his shirt to bind her wound. Her hand brushed his, warm and steady. A silent thanks. Mara held Saya close, the girl's basket now half empty, relics scattered. "They'll come again," Mara whispered, her voice trembling. Amos's gaze hardened, landing on a golden bead in the dirt, a Paiute symbol he'd seen before. On Liz's locket, stolen years ago. His blood ran cold. "What aren't you telling me?" he asked Neela, his tone sharp. Her eyes flickered, a shadow crossing her face. But she stayed silent. "What ties Amos's past to the Paiute relics? And can they outrun Cullen's wrath?" Don't miss the next part, because the truth cuts deeper than any knife. The Nevada dawn broke over Blackthorn Canyon, 1885, its pale light piercing the fading sandstorm, casting a soft glow on the dry creek bed. Amos Reed knelt beside a jagged rock, his gray eyes steady under his black Stetson, blood drying on his grazed arm. His Colt revolver hung heavy at his hip, its barrel warm from the fight. Neela, 30, stood beside him, her dark brown eyes fierce, her deerskin dress bloodied and torn, a fresh bandage on her arm. Her Paiute knife gleamed, her braided hair loose, framing a face etched with resolve. Mara, 24, held Saya close, her warm brown eyes soft but weary, her red shawl tattered, bruises fading under the morning light. Saya, 16, clutched her woven basket, half empty now, its golden Paiute relics scattered in the dust, her wide brown eyes bright with a courage she hadn't known she had. The canyon was quiet, the storm's howl reduced to a whisper, but danger lingered. Amos picked up a golden bead from the dirt, its Paiute symbol a woven star matching the one on Liz's stolen locket. His heart thudded, a truth clawing at his chest. "This symbol," he said, his voice rough, holding the bead out to Neela. "I've seen it before, on my wife's locket, taken when she died." Neela's eyes widened, her breath catching. "Eliza, was she Paiute?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Amos nodded, his throat tight. "Half. She never spoke of it, but that locket was her mother's." Neela's hand trembled as she pulled a small, worn pouch from her belt, revealing an identical bead. "This was my mother's," she said, her eyes locking on his. "Eliza was my sister." The revelation hit Amos like a bullet, his world tilting. Saya stepped forward, her small voice steady. "And mine." Mara's hand tightened on Saya's shoulder, her eyes glistening. "We're family," she whispered, her voice breaking. Amos's gaze dropped to the bead in his hand, Eliza's, memory flooding back her laugh, her strength, her blood on this canyon's dirt. Cullen's men hadn't just stolen gold, they'd torn his family apart, and now fate had brought them back. Cullen was there, Amos said, his voice cold. He led the raid that killed her. Neela's jaw tightened, her knife flashing. "Then we end him." A shout shattered the silence, hooves thundering from the canyon's mouth. Cullen, a hulking figure in a black duster, rode forward with two remaining men, rifles raised. His pale eyes gleamed with greed, a silver ring glinting on his finger, the same ring Amos had seen on Eliza's killer. "The gold." "Reed," Cullen roared, his voice cutting through the dawn. Amos stood, his Colt drawn, his heart a furnace of rage and redemption. "You took more than gold," he said, his voice deadly calm. Neela stepped beside him, her knife ready, her eyes burning with shared fury. Mara pushed Saya behind a rock, her shawl falling as she drew a small blade from her boot. The fight erupted like wildfire. Amos fired, dropping one rider, his body crumpling. In the dust, Neela lunged, her knife slicing Cullen's arm, blood spraying as he swung his rifle. Saya, defying Mara's plea, threw a rock, striking Cullen's horse, which reared. Throwing him to the ground, Amos tackled him, their fists colliding, dust rising like smoke. Neela's knife flashed again, pinning Cullen's sleeve to the earth. The final rider aimed at her, but Mara's blade found his side, and he fell. Cullen laughed, A guttural sound, even as Amos's fist cracked his jaw. You can't bring her back, he spat. Amos's cold pressed to his temple. No, but I can send you to hell. He fired, and Cullen went still, the canyon silent once more. As the sun rose, Amos, Neela, Mara, and Saya gathered the scattered relics, their hands brushing in quiet solidarity. The golden beads gleamed, a testament to the Paiute spirit that Cullen couldn't break. Amos looked at Saya, seeing Eliza's eyes in hers, and at Neela, her strength a mirror of his lost love. They weren't just survivors, they were family. Bound by blood and battle, the canyon stretched before them. No longer a grave, but a place of renewal. We rebuild, Neela said, her voice firm, the relics heavy in her hands. Amos nodded, his Stetson low, a quiet vow in his heart to honor Eliza's legacy. This tale of courage and kinship draws from the resilience of the Paiute people, who fought to preserve their culture against overwhelming odds in the 19th century. West, if this story stirred your heart, hit that like button, subscribe for more epic Western tales, and share it with a friend. Tell us in the comments, what's a legacy you'd fight to protect?